r/NoSleep. Posted by u/cloudyeonies. For the love of God, follow the rules of Raven Airways. As a kid fresh out of uni, I thought I'd seen it all. Frat boys hanging upside down from cypress trees after downing a 12-pack of Modelo. People showing up to economics lectures in Adventure Time onesies, too lazy to put on proper clothing. But that was before I flew on Raven Airways. And after this experience, I doubt I will ever fly again, if I don't have to. Now, university is quite an interesting chapter in one's life, and the 4 years I spent there were both eccentric yet incredible. In early June, I found myself graduating with honors, with a degree in international studies and a job offer in Miami. At 22, I was ecstatic. A few days after graduation, I would have to fly out to Miami from Seattle, which wouldn't be the most pleasant flight by any means, but it was a hell of a lot better than packing a suitcase and driving the distance. Plus, I've always been fond of flying. My dad was a captain for 31 years, and I grew up in airplanes. I was used to flying with the airline he worked for, as we received free family benefits. But there were no direct flights to Miami out of Seattle with that carrier, so I was out of luck. However, I did see that an airline I hadn't heard of offered flights around the country, including Miami, Raven Airways. I asked my dad about them, and he said they were probably a fairly new airline, as he wasn't familiar with them either. Their website seemed fairly legit, and the fares were pleasing to the eye, so I booked a round-trip flight to Miami and back, for just over $110. The one thing I wasn't happy about was the fact that it was a red-eye flight that departed at 10 and arrived at 6:30 the next morning. But it was my only option. I got to the airport at around 8 in the evening, and checked into the kiosk for Raven Airways. As it spat out my boarding pass, I heard someone chuckle next to me. Glancing to my left, I saw a male employee operating the kiosk adjacent to mine. Raven Airways, huh? Yeah, I replied, taking the boarding pass and stuffing it into my pocket. I've never flown with them before. Well, he shrugs, pulling out a screwdriver and poking it around the machine. It's an experience you'll never forget. After the stories my friends told me, I'll never fly with them. Oh? I raise an eyebrow. What, is it just bad customer service or something? Something like that, the man answered. Safe travels to you. Thanks, I say, a bit disturbed by his response. But I brush the worrisome thoughts aside. Of course I won't have a luxurious experience. I only paid $111 for a travel package that spanned the country. In fact, my experience would probably be mediocre at best. But I didn't want to be treated like a king, by any means. I just needed to get to Miami and back. After grabbing a croissant sandwich at Burger King, I arrived at the gate. There were only a handful of others in the area, maybe 30 at most. A lower number than I expected, for sure. The gate agent wore a black uniform and strikingly red lipstick, and had an accent from a location I couldn't quite put my finger on. As an international studies major, I was definitely interested to see where she was from. As we boarded, I handed her my boarding pass to scan. Excuse me, but may I ask where you're from? She stares at me for a moment, before returning the slip of paper to me. Somewhere you wouldn't know. Try me, I laughed. I just graduated. Sir, you're holding up the line. She gestured to the passengers behind me. I look at them, and lower my head. Sorry, I mumble as I rush onto the plane. The interior was in a similarly dark fashion as well, which I found quite odd. Nevertheless, I found my seat towards the back of the plane and jammed my carry-on into the overhead bin. Collapsing in my window seat, I watched the flickering lights of other aircraft light up the night sky. Sir, please read your safety card. I jump at the sudden voice, and see a flight attendant dressed like the foreign gate agent. His eyes are empty, voice monotone. He has the same accent as the woman before. Oh, yes. My apologies, I grin. He shuffles forward, in a robotic fashion. As if he's a sim. Frowning, I examine the safety card in front of me. Thank you for flying with Raven Airways. We want your flight to be as pleasant as possible. To maximize your experience with us, we request that you follow a set of rules and guidelines. 1. Do not use the lavatory when we are ascending or descending. 2. Remain seated when the seatbelt light is on. 3. Do not switch seats, even if your aisle is empty. 4. There may be flashing lights outside. If this occurs, close your window shade immediately. Avoid looking at the lights. Do not open it until a flight attendant instructs you to do so. 5. If you hear tapping on your window, do not look at it. Keep your shade closed until the tapping stops. If your window shade is up and you are unable to close it without looking at the window, stare straight ahead. Do not attempt to investigate the sound. Even if you see anomalies in your peripheral vision, continue to stare straight ahead. 6. Do not leave your seat when the interior lights of the aircraft turn red. 7. Do not look inside of the cockpit or attempt to enter the cockpit. 8. Under no circumstances should you ever enter a cabin class separate from yours, except for when you are boarding or exiting the aircraft. 9. If you order a meal, do not leave it unattended at any costs. 10. Do not enter the galley. 11. The crew consists of 3 male flight attendants, a pilot, and a co-pilot. If a female flight attendant attempts to interact with you, do not respond or make prolonged eye contact with her. Even if she tries to grab you or shout at you, do not acknowledge her. She will leave after 10 to 15 minutes. 12. If you find a child wandering down the aisles or sitting near you, do not interact with them, no matter what. Failure to abide by these rules could result in severe consequences. Once again, thank you for choosing to travel with Raven Airways. The hell? I grumble, looking at the back of the card. The back revealed nothing peculiar like the front, simply information on the aircraft, evacuation procedures, etc. Everything about it was normal, except nothing about it was normal. In fact, the only normal rules were the 1st, 2nd, 7th and 10th rules. Regardless, I fasten my seatbelt and sit back as the head flight attendant, the same one that assisted me earlier, makes the pre-flight announcements. It's nothing I haven't heard before. He doesn't mention the rules, curiously enough. Otherwise, I shut out his voice and stare outside as the plane taxis and eventually leaves the ground. I follow the first rule and I don't attempt to take a leak while the plane climbs. Around 20 minutes after takeoff, the seatbelt light is turned off, and passengers begin to mill around the cabin. I read through the menu, seeing that there really wasn't much to order. Besides, the Burger King I had consumed before boarding was still keeping my belly full. But I decided to order a ginger ale anyways. "Can I help you?" a flight attendant asks me, her voice high and cheery. She doesn't have the accent like the rest of the crew. I'm about to answer her question when I remember rule number 11. The crew consists of 3 male flight attendants, a pilot, and a co-pilot. If a female flight attendant attempts to interact with you, do not respond or make prolonged eye contact with her. Even if she tries to grab you or shout at you, do not acknowledge her. She will leave after 10 to 15 minutes. My hands suddenly begin to shake, and I attempt to ignore her. She asks me again, and I don't answer. The seat next to mine dips with a weight much heavier than I'd expect from what little I saw of the woman, but I don't try to investigate further. "Sir, are you alright?" "I'm fine. Just leave me alone. I'm starting to regret flying with Raven Airways. It would be more of a hassle to find connecting flights to Miami, but it would be a lot more pleasant than whatever the hell this was." A hand clamps on my shoulder and it takes every ounce of my being to not react. I exhale slowly through my nostrils, trying to ignore the nails digging into my collarbone, blood trickling down my chest. I can hear her yelling at me, but I have no idea what she's saying. That's the strangest part, I think. She's not speaking another language, I can tell she's speaking English. But in my stupor, I've completely alienated myself from the woman. And yet, just as I'm about to give in, she's gone. "Can I help you?" The familiar words jar me from my headspace, and I stare up at a now concerned and very normal male flight attendant. The seat next to me is empty. The leather hasn't even been disturbed. It's like she was never there to begin with. I feel my shoulder and to my surprise, there are no marks. There's no blood gushing down my torso, no lacerations from her hands, no red indentations. Nothing. Curling my lip, I look at the steward once again. There was a flight attendant. She hurt my shoulder. "Ah, that's not possible," he replies, smiling. But the smile isn't natural by any means. It doesn't even manifest until his sentence is finished. As if a switch was turned on. And it vanishes the second he speaks again, in his monotonous voice. "Every flight attendant on this plane is a man." "But the rules," I insist, taking the safety card and pointing to the list of rules. Or, where they were. Now, there is simply a blank surface. "I'm not sure what you're talking about," he says, tilting his head to the side. "Can I provide a beverage or snack for you?" Given the odd circumstances of the flight, I suddenly find myself distrustful of what they serve. My craving for a ginger ale vanishes. "I'm alright, thank you," I say quietly. He moves on, and I stare at my safety card again. There they are. The rules have returned. Except, this time, there is a new one, highlighted in red. 13. Do not question the rules. Are you fucking kidding me? It would have been nice to know that before I asked the flight attendant about them. Sighing, I lay back in my seat. Part of me is too frightened to even close my eyes and try to sleep. I check my watch and see that it is 11:30 in the evening. Fuck it. Maybe if I at least try to sleep, I can get through this faster. Boy, was I wrong. The second I close my eyes, I can hear sirens and alarms blaring throughout the plane. My eyes snap open, and to my horror, we're in a nose-down position, descending quite rapidly. On top of this, as I look at the other passengers, they're not quite right. Their skin is literally peeling off of them, as their eyeballs dangle from their sockets. Blood shoots out of every orifice, and one begins to slowly claw their throat out, their hoarse screams dying away. The abhorrent scene makes my stomach turn, and I can feel bile rising in my throat. But when I blink again, everything is fine. I need to get off of this damn plane. With my stomach still bubbling, I wearily stand and hobble down the aisle towards the bathrooms. Locking myself in one, I take deep breaths, looking at myself in the mirror. You're alright. You're just airsick. Once the urge to vomit has faded, I try to exit the washroom. But the door won't budge. You're shitting me. I look under the crack of the door, and see a scarlet glow emanating from the cabin. Fuck. Do not leave your seat when the interior lights of the aircraft turn red. I mean, I didn't leave when the lights turned red. I was just in the bathroom. What was I supposed to do now? Glue my ass to the toilet seat and hope for the best. In my confusion, I sit on the toilet and wait, staring at the fierce, crimson hues that leak under the door. Like blood. At this point, I wouldn't be surprised if blood just started to flood the bathroom. However, the glow fades into nothing quickly, and I experimentally try to open the door again. This time, it slides open with ease. Hurrying to my seat, I put on my seatbelt and wait. It's midnight now. 3.5 hours left on this godforsaken plane. What will happen this time? Surprisingly enough, 2.5 hours go by pretty fast. The lights in the plane turned red again, but I didn't leave my seat, and within a few minutes, they went back to normal. I still held back from eating or drinking anything. I was getting bad vibes from this whole thing. I was ready to get on the ground and kiss the floor. A steward walks by, letting us know that we will be beginning our descent into Miami shortly, and to expect mild turbulence. I was more than happy to strap in and wait to land. I was done with the hallucinations, done with everything on the damn flight. But no. We weren't done yet. Another flight attendant runs through the aisle much more frantically this time, saying the same message over and over again. He wasn't shouting it nor whispering it. Although he was clearly perturbed, he maintained the crew's characteristic, mellow voice. Close the shades. Close the shades. Close the shades. I whip my head around and am shocked to see a series of bright lights swathed across the clouds. They streak around each other, dancing in an intricate duet and flickering. The rods of light kept changing colors, from white to cyan to burgundy to violet to chartreuse to gold to silver and back to white. Then, I remember the rules. Rule number 4. There may be flashing lights outside. If this occurs, close your window shade immediately. Avoid looking at the lights. Do not open it until a flight attendant instructs you to do so. Shit. I hiss, slamming the shade down. Why didn't I just keep my goddamn shade closed for the entire flight? The second I close it, I can hear banging noises on the side of the fuselage. It rattles the window, and I hold down the shade. I can almost hear faint wails, but I can't tell if they're from whatever's tapping on the plane or if they're from the interior. The plane shakes even more, to the point where I'm practically being thrown around my seat, with just the seatbelt keeping me from smashing into the overhead bins. Finally, my strength gives out, and my fingers slip loose from the shade. It bounces back open, and for a split second, I can see houses just below us. Then, everything is on fire. I can feel the flames licking at my skin, snaking around my limbs and choking me. The heat makes my eyes water, my skin boil. I don't know what's happened. I just know I need to get out. Help. As I rip off my seatbelt, the scalding metal searing through my fingertips, I see the silhouette of a boy in the aisle next to mine. The flames have not yet reached his seat, and he's sobbing as smoke begins to flood the cabin. Without thinking, I grab him, despite my smoldering clothing, and I waddle towards an emergency exit. I can see bodies in my peripheral vision, and the smell of fuel, flesh and flames assaults my nose. I wheeze as the boy in my arms continues to scream. We tumble out of the burning aircraft, but instead of the ground I expect to land on, we're suddenly falling through the air. I look up, horrified, and see that the plane is still flying. That can't be possible. I can't even bear to look down as both myself and this child hurtle to our certain deaths. With a jolt, I thrash around in my seat, and to my shock, we're at the gate. Safe and sound. Passengers are beginning to exit the airplane, and as I wipe a sheen of sweat from my brow, I undo my seatbelt and shakily retrieve my carry-on. "Thank you for flying with us, have a wonderful day." The flight attendants smile at me as I leave. I can't bring myself to look at them. I just leave the plane and wheel my tiny carry-on bag behind me. It's still fairly empty in the Miami International Airport terminal. I can feel the hairs on my arms raised from my horrific hallucination. As I depart the aircraft, I look around for the little boy I saw. He's nowhere to be found. I walk through the airport, heading towards the baggage claim. And to my utter shock, as I grab my bag, I see a familiar face. "You." The man who had been working on the kiosk in Seattle looks up at me. He's wearing an airport uniform, hauling luggage onto a trolley of sorts. "I'm sorry? What the hell, man? How did you get here before me?" "Dude, I have no idea what you're talking about," he says, raising an eyebrow. "Do you have the wrong person?" "No, don't play this game with me. I just got off of the worst flight of my fucking life. Why didn't you warn me?" Hey, calm down. Let's go talk to customer service or something. What flight were you on?" The man's defensive demeanor begins to fade, and I slowly catch my breath. Maybe it wasn't him. God, I'm an idiot. "Raven Airways," I breathe. "Flight 903. This time, he stops. The worker looks at me, looking even more confused. "Excuse me? Raven Airways?" "Sir, I have no idea what you're talking about. I've never heard of that airline, and even if they do exist, they sure as hell don't serve Miami." "What? How the hell did I get here then?" Shell-shocked, I step backwards, jaw trembling. "Yes, of course. My bad. It's all right. I'm guessing you got off of a red-eye flight? Those can mess with your head." The man grins, and peers at something next to me. "Your son is adorable, by the way. What's his name?" "Son?" I follow his gaze. The little boy from before smiles at me, flashing his pearly whites. No. Fuck this, I grumble, shoving past the two. But just before I can escape their grasps, the man grabs my arm. "You shouldn't have saved the child," he whispers. "Rule number 12 says to never interact with unattended children on the aircraft. Now, it won't leave you alone until you're dead." I cancelled my return flight with Raven Airways and instead opted to fly home with Alaska Airlines, despite the cancellation fee and the cost to book with another airline. I didn't get the job, either. I was too jarred from my experience to focus on the interview. Everywhere I go, I see the boy. He won't leave my sight. He watches me as I sleep. I'm worried he's going to hurt me.